Hey there, are you grieving the potential loss of a loved one or feeling overwhelmed with the loss of someone you care about? If so, you're in the right place. Lisa Hartung here, and this podcast is designed to guide you through topics surrounding death and dying. We'll dive into multifaceted aspects of grief, offering you a blend of personal stories, expert insights, and practical advice for your grief journey. May this be a safe space for you to learn, listen, and ask questions about your own life and loved ones. So grab your favorite beverage and let's dive in. Welcome, everyone, back to the podcast this week. I am super excited to welcome to the podcast Dan McNamee. Dan was born and raised in Cleveland, Ohio. In a turn of events he still doesn't understand, he now works and lives primarily in Paris with his wife and two young boys. He speaks French, sort of. When he was a kid, he really wanted to be either a stuntman or a baseball player. He became a lawyer instead, and now he's written a book about living with, and somehow through, a bleak pancreatic cancer diagnosis. None of that makes sense either, but Dan is working on getting more comfortable living with the absurdity of it all. And this is Dan's book, Everything That Makes Me Happy Makes Me Sad. So without further ado, welcome to the podcast, Dan.
Thank you very, very much for having me. I appreciate it.
Oh my goodness, you have such a journey that you have been on. When my mom was going through her pancreatic cancer journey, every night I would look for hope stories. And so when I came across yours through Project Purple, I said, "Oh my gosh, I have to talk to Dan. Like these stories are the stories that need to be shared. And these are the stories of hope." And it's not that it was an easy journey by any means for you. So maybe you could take us back to 5 years ago when you were originally diagnosed with pancreatic cancer and kind of how that transpired.
Yep. And after, saying I would go wherever you took me the conversation, I'm going to start off by first thanking you, but also second saying, in case nobody gets through, the whole interview, there is hope. When I was diagnosed, I knew what the statistics were, and I was terrified, and I didn't even begin to consider hope. And I'm 5 years post-diagnosis, 2 years off treatment with no sign of the disease. And my doctor at Memorial Sloan Kettering has said she would consider it to be me to be in complete remission. So to anybody listening, whether you're going through it yourself or a family member is going through it, smart people in laboratories are curing the most difficult cancers that we know of, including pancreatic cancer. So good things are happening. The future is arriving. Just keep going. Then we'll go back to 5 years ago. So actually, my 5-year anniversary was 30 June 2025. So 30 June 2020, 4 or 5 days before that, I had pain in my left leg, but I was 40 years old. I was still young enough to have the misimpression that I would live forever. And so I just ignored that pain in my left leg for a few days. And then it went away, and I had the same pain, but a little bit worse in my right leg. And my wife convinced me to go to a doctor. We were living in Paris at the time, convinced me to go to just sort of a GP, like your regular
Yeah.
knockabout doctor, to go see what the score was. I went in there, and the doctor couldn't quite figure out what it was, or she didn't let on what she thought it might be. And eventually later in the day, I went up to a hospital just outside of Paris to get an ultrasound of my leg to see what was in there. After much searching, the ultrasound tech found a blood clot in my leg. And so that meant that I had to go get a CT scan, and I was actually going to be admitted to the hospital for the blood clot because they're worried that it let loose in the body and goes into the lungs or the brain or whatever it is. So when he said I was going to have to be admitted, I had a 4-year-old and a 9-month-old at the time. I knew how upset they would be if I was in the hospital, or at least the 4-year-old. The 9-month-old wasn't quite, thinking it through at that point. And I was actually whether I knew something was wrong, I don't think it's true, but I started to cry at that moment because I don't know. I was just worried about being away from my sons and my wife. That was quite upsetting. And then I was brought next door to get the CT scan of my chest and my abdomen, to make sure there was no blood clots traveling around through there. And I was laying on the bed, or in the machine rather, and I was actually thinking to myself, you hear those stories of those people who wake up one morning and they go to the doctor, and then at the end of the day, they're told that they have cancer and that cancer might kill them.
Mm.
And I was laying there thinking, that must just be horrible for those people. Like, how could you even put the pieces back together? I had my CT scan in France. They read them, like, or at least in Paris, they read them right at the time that they happen. So I went to the waiting room. A doctor pulled me back in 20 minutes later into a dark room, pointed at the screen, and said, "You have tumors on your pancreas and your liver." And I come from sort of a medical family, lots of doctors. And so I knew enough to know that pancreatic cancer was a very bad one. And so that started the journey, started the process. I was admitted to the hospital that day, obviously. And then that was very much in the middle of COVID. So there was all extra sort of difficulties around that process. And we made the decision to move back to Cleveland with my boys and my wife, who moved into my mother's house, actually. So we all lived there together. And I did 9 months of chemo and then 2 medical trials in New York. Yeah, that was about sort of 3 years of intense treatment and now 2 years post-treatment.
What was going through your head when you were admitted that first time and you had your wife and kids at home?
It's funny. Nobody's ever actually asked that direct question. Haven't really thought that much about what was actually going through my head at that moment because like the brain. I also the brain scrubs away some of that
Yeah,
stuff
it like blacks
because
it out because
yeah, it's just too heavy and hard to remember all the time. And it was just, I mean, it was just bleak terror. I
yeah,
mean, I don't even know that there was there. It's not like there was a thought on repeat.
yeah.
Yeah, it was the first time that I really stared into the abyss. You
Mm,
know, the subtitle of the book is Fun Life Tips from Death's Abyss, which is not easy to say. I don't remember a thought, I just remember darkness. And I sort of lived in that darkness off and on for, well, still for 5 years, because it's not like it's gone. There's much more light in my life now than there was on that day. But
mhm.
that it's something that now comes and goes. But I don't remember a thought process. It really was just fear and pain.
Yeah. So the pain in your leg, obviously it was bad enough that your wife was like, "Look, Dan, you have to go to the
Mm.
hospital." Like out of 10, what was the pain level?
I mean, it wasn't a 10, but it was this deep throbbing. I mean, it was unmistakable, and it was a pain I'd never had before. So it wasn't, it wasn't like, oh, I just had a little thing and you can ignore it. Like if you have a blood clot, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not like anything else. It's not like, oh, I exercised too much or I pulled this or whatever. It's a whole different, feels different than everything else.
Yeah, it's so hard because, pancreatic cancer is one of those that you generally don't catch it until much later on. And there have been subtle signs for a while, but you just chalk them up to something else.
Yeah,
So,
I don't know that I had anything, like I didn't have any digestive problems. I didn't have any stomach pain. I didn't have any, and I was stage 4. I was, in my liver as well. And I don't know. I don't know why. I mean, luckily I had that blood clot because who knows, it goes on for another 6 months or something like that. Then you're in a different place. So
mm.
thank God for blood clots, I guess. I don't know.
You gotta look at the bright side.
Yeah,
So you're now in the hospital and you're in Paris, which is where you live. But you do have brothers and a sister who are doctors back
yeah,
in Cleveland or back in the US. And so you decide to go to Cleveland to seek treatment. So how did that I think the hardest part when you get the diagnosis is knowing what to do next.
yeah.
So would love to hear how that you really have to
Yeah.
be your own self-advocate. So
Oh, I mean, that I think comes in particularly. So there's standard of care for almost all of these things. Like even before you're eligible for a trial, you need to do the basic stuff, the standard stuff. And for pancreatic cancer, as you and others probably know, you do chemo to see if the tumors are will respond to chemotherapy, and then after that, you would go into the other pieces. I mean, the reason I moved back to the States is that standard care that I received in Cleveland was no different than what I would have received in France. The reason we went to Cleveland was just facility with the medical system and my own comfort levels. I spoke some amount of French then. I speak a bit better now, but even that, I mean, it proved to be correct. I mean, the importance of feeling comfortable in the language and the culture and everything else is it's really primary so that you can make the best decisions and be your own advocate, as you say. So we moved back because I had my siblings are all doctors, my cousin's a doctor at the clinic, and it was Cleveland Clinic, and it was the right place to go where I had, the understanding of the system and the support of the family.
Yeah. And were they able to help kind of decode the reports to say, like,
For
oh,
sure.
actually, in layman's terms, this is what it means?
For sure. I mean, and I had a certain level of comfort with medical vocabulary, and doctors are not off-putting to me because I'm related to so many of them.
Yeah.
But even still, it's so hard to understand what's going on in any of those meetings and any of those pieces of paper. Again, if you go into this and you're uncomfortable with the vocabulary, or you're intimidated by doctors, or you're just terrified, anything somebody is telling you, it washes over you. You don't even collect the information, and then you can't follow up. You can't do the stuff that you need. My understanding of the system and my understanding of the vocabulary helped. Oftentimes, for certain meetings, my sister would come with me and my wife. Somebody would be there to take notes. We recorded a lot of the conversations so that we understood, so we go back and listen to them. Because the number of times we would have a meeting and you'd ask a question and then you'd walk out of the meeting and be like, oh, what did they say about that thing? Or I forgot to ask that, or whatever it is. And so it was really fundamental for me to understand what was going on, to have people in the room or listening in or listening to the recording afterwards to say, oh, we should check this, we should check that.
Yeah, I think that that is in itself such an important like tidbit of advice for people who are going through this is, have some sort of recording device and someone
Mhm.
other than the individual
Yeah,
because you're in a completely different mindset.
it's crazy.
Um, you're like, I just need to get through this. Like
Yeah,
I need to be there for my family. So how can you help me get there?
yeah. And I just think the brain, it protects itself. It's in these meetings, you're talking about your own life and death and
Hey.
them dripping chemotherapy into your chest, and your hands and feet are going numb, and you're this and that. And you end up just staring at the paper towel dispenser. You almost just, I don't know, I just think it's, your system is overwhelmed by the information, and so we would go in with a pen and paper, questions written in advance.
Mhm.
Somebody would be taking notes. That really, it was hugely important.
Yeah, and throughout the book, you talk about just the love and support from not only your close-knit family, but the extended family and your community. And so, how big of a role did that play in your well-being throughout this journey?
Well, first, the extended group was also really fundamentally important for me, my wife, my young boys. People would come over, and if I was too ill to be doing this, that, or the other, they'd take them out. And young boys are a little bit like untamed horses or whatever. You got to let them get out and run. And so just those bits, that amount of support for them, enabled them to support me. And then the way I think about it in my mind is that each one of these is just, it's a string, it's a connection. Each one of them add up to a rope that you can hold on to. And that rope there's just more tensile strength. I think that's the right word to it, that can hold you and hold your wife, your kids. And one of those things matters. And nobody ever knows what to do. I just lost a beloved family member a few weeks ago to a glioblastoma.
Oh.
And I actually think in some ways being next to somebody with cancer, certainly a difficult cancer like glioblastoma or pancreatic cancer with pretty difficult odds,
Mhm.
I think being next to that person in some ways is harder, having gone through both being the patient and being with the person. As the patient, at least I knew what I could do was I could wake up, I could get to my doctor's appointment. I could do the chemotherapy. I could do the next thing. I could go. I could move forward. Like I had agency in it, and I couldn't fix it, but I knew what I could do something. But when you're next to somebody, you can't fix any of it. All we want is for to help someone and make them feel better or fix the freaking thing.
Yeah.
And you can't. Nobody can. And the patient, as a patient, you know that that's true, and you don't expect anyone to do that for you. The problem is people get scared. They know they can't fix it. People get scared and clam up or move away. And the only thing you can do as a loved one or a friend or a neighbor or whatever is just be there and do a thing. So I think it's so hard for family members, and I'm deeply grateful for my wife and for my mom and my stepdad and my siblings and my cousins and my friends. I mean, every moment of that mattered.
Yeah. There's there's a shirt that PanCan has, and it says moments matter. And my sister and I got that when my mom was going through chemo, and it's so true. I mean, moments
Mhm.
matter in life anyway, but when you receive a diagnosis such as, pancreatic cancer, it's where that becomes heightened,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
And you end up cherishing the moments that you have and really reveling in the relationships and realize how strong, like at the end of life, what are you going to remember? It's not the project or the job that you did, but it's the people that
yeah,
were around you.
yeah. I mean, that's the only way yeah, that is fundamentally what my book really is about. The realization that whether we believe in God or not, I think the only real explanation of why we're here, either put here by God or just by chance, is for us to search out joy and happiness.
Yeah.
And it seems really simple, but if you look around, it doesn't seem like very many of us are succeeding at that. If you look around at the state of the world, but it's such a cliched thing to say, but it really is the only thing that matters. And I think the only way to achieve sort of sustainable happiness, not momentary happy moments, but sustainable, a life capable of sustainable happiness is through the relationships with family and friends. And so that I sort of knew that before, but it's really when you're staring into the abyss that it's made clear.
Yeah. And do you find now that you're on the other side and you are in remission, that when you are going through life and you see, maybe friends or acquaintances, and you see them not living that happiness or like not feeling grateful for the relationships they have, is that a sadness or is it like I think back to the play Our Town where, they come back from having passed, looking back at themselves and being like, just open your eyes, just talk to one another. I,
Yeah.
I think about
Well,
that with people on their
I-
phones all the time too. I'm like, put your phone down and just enjoy
of
life with your
course.
family. But
Of course. Well, I mean, two things. One, I'm in remission, maybe complete remission, but, and, we can talk about it, but it doesn't always, or very often, it doesn't feel like that. I mean, the
yeah.
terror and fear that gets implanted, it's a real process of forgetting if you can. But the point of forgetting, to my next point, is that it's not even people next to me when I say, hey, you should be focused on this stuff. It's myself. I
Mm,
mean, it's hard to live the reality of cherishing every moment when you're not being reminded that like every moment needs to be cherished. I mean, it would be very sort of like Eastern religion, right? Or Buddhism, but I don't live in a Buddhist society and I can't really be a transcendental meditation person every day.
mhm.
And so I mean, I took the train from Paris to London this morning. My first train got canceled. I had to cancel a meeting and I was, doing this stuff and I became anxious about stuff that I know fundamentally doesn't matter. But I still became anxious
As
about it
human.
because I still have to pay my mortgage, you know? So like I just don't think, save for the Dalai Lama and whoever else, that we achieve this level of heightened peace and understanding, and then we just live that way. It's a constant battle to remind yourself, even for myself, that this is what matters. This doesn't matter. Yes, I have to do it, but it shouldn't ruin or taint this. And I think the brain doesn't want to live in fear. And so it tries to forget the most difficult things, but those difficult things were also the things that allowed you to focus on the most important things. And so it's just sort of that constant give and take.
Yeah. And it's that I love that you're like, yes, it's a continuous journey. Like we are all always working on how to be better or be more present. And I think the hardest part is showing up for ourselves.
Yeah, and also being like, oh man, I didn't do great today. I'm gonna try to do better tomorrow.
Yeah. And even
And cutting yourself some slack, which also then you're more likely to cut other people in your life slack as well. And it's a constant process of change and evolution. And that sounds trite, and it is, but like the only people who are no longer evolving, they live in the cemetery.
mm,
And we have we're lucky enough to be constantly evolving and changing, and we just have to allow ourselves to do that. So.
yeah. And throughout your treatment, was there like a mantra that you were thinking, part of, and I want to get into the clinical trials, but you were in two, and the second one was like very dark and a lot of heavy feelings for you, and you actually thought that this is the end. Was there any like sort of mantra or thought process that you kept thinking of, like, okay, I've got to do it for the boys, I've got to do it for my wife?
Yeah, I mean that's a huge part of it. I mean, the mantra to the extent that I had one, and I think this is the way I thought about it. It's just so hard to remember because there was a fog of war, so it's hard to remember exactly what was going. But I think my thought process was just stay alive, like
Mm,
keep going, stay alive for as long as you can, because they are coming up with new stuff. And we're on the verge of curing, like I said, so many of these most difficult cancers. Like we're understanding what's going on. Like smart people in laboratories are curing stuff. So I would just keep going, stay alive for as long as you can, because tomorrow the thing might show up. And the thing showed up for me. And so, but fundamentally what it came down to was I developed a really honest and trusting relationship with my doctors, but in particular, one doctor at Memorial Sloan Kettering, Dr. O'Reilly, who's one of the renowned sort of names and people in the field. And I just happened to be able to sort of get in touch with her. And we could sort of talk about how that happened. But I developed a very honest and open relationship with her. I was able to ask her the hard questions and trust that she was giving me the right answers, and she gave them to me in a way that I could understand.
yeah.
And that's what got me into the first trial, which was an immunotherapy plus a PARP inhibitor trial.
Mhm.
That was a later stage trial, so they were sort of through the safety bit. They knew that it wouldn't kill me, and it was just whether or not it would work with hard tumor pancreatic cancer. And it did. I have one of the BRCA mutations. It's one of
Yeah.
the many things that Angelina Jolie and I have in common. But so for BRCA2, for whatever reason, the immunotherapy plus PARP inhibitor, for me, it worked incredibly well. My tumors shrunk, and then disappeared with that
Well,
first trial. That one was in Memorial Sloan Kettering in New York. So in the beginning, I was flying from Cleveland to New York every 3 weeks, and then it eventually turned to 6 weeks. So we moved back to Paris. So I was going back and forth between Paris and New York every 6 weeks or so, which was its own difficulty. But
yeah.
it didn't matter because my tumors kept shrinking. So you just keep going back to that well. That was a 2-year trial. We started looking for a trial while I was still on chemo, maybe early on, middle of that 9 months, we started to reach out to different people around the country who were doing trials. So MSK and MD Anderson, what are you guys doing? So that's how we met Dr. O'Reilly. That's how we were able to kind of say we knew right when the chemo ended, we were going to try to use this immunotherapy. And so we were able to kind of link them up that way. And then in the middle, that was a 2-year trial. In the middle of that trial, we started to say, okay, Dr. O'Reilly, when this ends, what's next? And she said, we're doing this other trial. It's very early stage, still in the safety stage, so trying to see if it's going to kill the patient or not. And I was the third patient ever to do it. actually the fourth. There were two other patients in the trial, but the trial was developed because the South African oncologist had pancreatic cancer, and she came up with this treatment on her own, like 15 years ago now,
Wow.
convinced somebody to do it for her, and she was still alive. So I think this is literally true that the other pancreatic cancer specialists are like, well, this woman is still alive. So we kind of need to see if this is what did it. And so I was the fourth patient ever to have it, the third in the trial. And it was, I asked my French oncologist and an oncologist in MD Anderson, here's the protocol for this trial. You know my background. Do you think I should do it? And the MD Anderson guy said, no, I don't think so, because it's too early stage. I would just wait to see what happens with it. And the French one said it's too toxic, so I wouldn't do it. And I will tell you, if an oncologist tells you it's too toxic, it means it's pretty freaking toxic. So it was extremely difficult. I mean, it was two treatment cycles, very difficult.
Yeah, and so in the book you talk about, and this chapter is just so gripping because you talk about them dripping the poison that you know is at toxic levels, right? These are vitamins, so they deliver the dose of drug, the chemo or the cancer fighting drug, and then they also put two different types of toxic levels of vitamins into your port as well.
Yeah.
So your body is kind of at war with itself.
Yeah, so it's kind of what they do the treatment for multiple myeloma. It's similar to that, but I think with higher levels of toxicity on all fronts. And so they dump the chemo in there, and then they dump the vitamins in there, and it actually wants to create a situation where your body sort of freaks out. Your cells will open up under stress, will like open themselves up more. And the hope is that the chemo will be able to penetrate the bad stuff more easily, like get places it otherwise wouldn't. The
Yeah.
way I had it in my mind is it was like napalming the forest and then replanting the trees. And as I was laying there, so it was two rounds of treatment. And as I was laying there the first time, so they dumped the chemo in, which isn't very much fun, but I'd done that a lot. And that's just kind of is you know what that's like. And then they start putting in, they do, I think it was like B12 or something, I can't remember now, and then vitamin C, and they're dumping the vitamin C in it. I started to be like, oh man, I'm feeling really bad. I'm feeling really, really bad. But I'm in Memorial Sloan Kettering in New York. I'm surrounded by a bunch of really smart people. They all know what they're doing. This is just temporary. I'll be fine. And then it's getting worse. I'm like, but I'm only the third person to ever do this, so maybe they don't really know. And then, so whether it's a combination of like a panic attack, but also with the actual, because I had full body sort of spasms and sickness, and I was like, there, I'm dying.
Yeah.
And God damn it, they're killing me. And my wife and kids are in Paris, and
Mm.
I'm here in New York. And what have I done? What have I done? And they cut off the vitamin C. They shot some more morphine into me. And the only thing I know about war movies is that morphine is supposed to work, and the morphine didn't work. And then they gave me another one, and that didn't work. And I was like, oh my, this is all. And eventually, once they stopped the infusion, my body sort of it stopped, it slowly stopped over maybe an hour or so. It was terrifying. And then I was like, there's no way I'm doing this again. And then the brain does its thing where it's like, oh, 6 days later, well, maybe. And then 7 days later, and then you sort of put yourself in, then I did it again. So,
Yeah. And because it's two rounds.
yeah.
And so with your first, so you had chemo and then you were like, you know what? I really need to find a clinical trial because that's the way that I can go and I can be in remission and be healed from this. So then you go to the
I never thought I
physician.
was going to be in remission, and I never thought I was going to be healed. I didn't even consider it I never considered it as a possibility. I just kept saying stay alive, and this would be a long-term
Maybe a
illness.
little longer. Okay.
Yeah, but
Terminal
I mean,
illness, but
yeah,
it gets me more time with my family.
yeah, yeah.
So you did this first trial, and that essentially took away your tumors.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
what made you jump into the second trial
Again, just trust
with the
with
oncologist?
Dr. O'Reilly.
Yeah.
Doctor, she just, I talked to two other oncologists. They said that they wouldn't do it, but Dr. O'Reilly, she knows what she's doing. B, she knew my case in and out, and there's an art and there's a science to being a doctor. She has both. Ultimately, really, I did it because I trusted her. And, I did it in consultation with my wife. We talked about it a lot, consultation with my siblings and my mom. But ultimately, it was pretty clear, like, yeah, we could sit and wait and we'll see what happens. Hope it doesn't come back. But the CT scans don't go down to a cellular level. So the thought is like there's a very good possibility that there's something still knocking around in there. And yeah, if it pops back up, it looks like with chemotherapy or immunotherapy, we'll be able to knock it back down again. But it looks like doesn't comfort you at 2 o'clock in the morning. So when Dr. O'Reilly said we think we'll be able to get you through the trial, and we think this could hit the hard reset button on your bone marrow and could really give you a chance to be past it. I was like, well, and you just kind of got to trust the people who got you there.
Hmm. Yeah. And with pancreatic cancer, there are so few options. So it's like, let's try it.
But yeah, I mean, the fact that I had those options is incredible.
Hmm.
I
Yeah, my
mean,
mom wasn't able to do
no.
trials, and you have to time it with when you got and it's really hard, right? And it sounds like you were connected with Dr. O'Reilly, and so that really was the game-changing move for
Yeah.
you on your cancer journey.
Yeah, and I'll say just how we did it. My sister and my wife and my brothers spent time on I think it's .gov or .org. I always forget. But clinical trials, it's the federal site in the US that has a list of all the trials, and it's
Hmm.
not that easy to navigate. It's not that user friendly, but if you do, you can identify which institutions are doing trials, and in with your illness, you just reach out to Dr. O'Reilly's office or Dr. Smaglow's office and MD Anderson and say, hey, this is who I am. This is my case. Can I get a consult? And they'll do consults. Sometimes it has to be in person. Other times it can be virtual. Again, arming yourself with the information, it has to be the family. I know that there are like consultants out there that will help people, and we didn't go down that route, but I'm always a little suspicious of how helpful that is. But you just find the people and go see them, find the people and go see them, find the people and go see them.
Yeah. And your hard work paid off, right?
Yeah, it was the hard work of people around me. I kept getting up and I went where they told me to go. It paid off. And again, I was really lucky that the timing worked out. Some of it was luck that my team created and that we were always asking, what's the next step? What's the next step?
Yeah.
And so we were able to plan. And also, honestly, I was lucky that I had an health insurance policy that covered me in the United States and that allowed me to do these trials. That is just different. You get to live in the future when you're in these trials. Like this is the future of medicine. There's no guarantee that anyone's going to work, but like some of this, you're like you have a chance to live in the future. I was so lucky to have a chance to get into these trials and to live in the future. And hopefully that what I would receive is now going to be the present. But I was able to just get a view of it early. So
Going into the second trial, you and your wife talked about it. Was there any prep that you did for like, if this is the end of life, did you get your affairs in order?
no, no, that would have
I
been too
know.
much. I couldn't have done that. I don't think. I don't even know I mean, no, we didn't. I don't think I could have done it. If I would have sat down with my wife and been like, what are we going to do if I don't come back?
That wasn't
I,
an option in your head.
I just couldn't have done. I couldn't have done it. I get. I'll start crying right now. I wouldn't have been able to sit down and write out a piece of paper or whatever else it is. And should we have done it? Yeah, I'm a lawyer. As a lawyer, would I have advised me to do it? Yeah. It was more like they stayed in Paris. I was in that second trial it was like 4 months, and I didn't see them for 4 months. And we're gonna do it, and we'll see you in a few months.
Yeah. And you could FaceTime with them. You did say at one point you lost your hair.
Yep. Yeah, yeah, no, my beautiful locks, they fell out. That was the only time. I didn't lose my hair from with chemo. I didn't lose my hair in the
Oh,
first
wow.
trial. It was just I was actually sitting and writing the book in this apartment that we rented in New York, and I just pulled out a clump of my hair. It was like pulling out grass with no roots, and was like, okay, that was it. Before I had left, I still go to the same barber in Paris that I went to before I left, in part because right before I left, I knew there was a very high likelihood that I was going to lose my hair, and I didn't want to FaceTime with my boys and them to be terrified that I was bald. So I went and I had the barber shave my head. And the barber still talks about it. He's like, because I went in there with my two kids and my wife so that they could see the process. They could see, and the guy cut my hair really short. And he's like, "Is this how long you want it?" And I asked my son, my oldest son, what do you think, shorter or not? And he was kind of crying, and I was a puddle. And he said, "No, I think you should probably go a little shorter so he could get used to it." And so we buzzed it a little bit more. And I mean, it was. Yeah, it was a moment that I will never forget. I hope he does. I hope Charles, the younger one does as well, but it's certainly not one that I'll forget.
Yeah, I think that that's such a hard time when anyone is going through chemo is that do I shave my hair so it's not falling out in clumps? Because
It's
that's
so
like,
funny. Like you might be you're so sick. Like everything is so terrible, and it's amazing. Like you would think vanity would go by the wayside, right? Like you'd think but it doesn't.
no.
Not for anybody. Like it's like a fundamental human feeling.
Yeah.
You're so sick and ill and scared, and you're upset that your hair is falling out. That's like it doesn't make any sense to me.
Well, that's your identity
I
though,
know.
right?
Yeah.
Like,
Hmm.
and so you feel like you're losing a part of yourself.
Hmm.
And there's no control in chemo, but you at least you can control how you style your hair. And then when it falls out, it's like you lose that part of, that you had of
But I think that's so much of it though is the element of control.
yeah.
It's like a trope at this point, the dream about your teeth falling out.
Mm,
It's about a loss of control, right? And so that's what this is. If you lose your hair, it is a very physical reminder that you see every time you look in a mirror that you don't have control. That you don't have control over the most fundamental elements of your life.
hmm.
And so it's vanity, but it's also just terror. Like you can't help your hair falling out.
Yeah, terror is a great, it's like the I never thought this would happen to me.
It's so
And
real.
yeah, hmm it's so real. And now you have your hair back. So it
Yeah,
does
yeah,
grow
yeah.
back.
Yeah, that's the most important thing. I I also have my pancreas is doing well, my liver is doing well, and my hair is back. The last being the most important, of course.
There you go.
Mhm.
Got the hair back.
Yeah,
So, and one thing that I think is really wonderful about your journey is you were at a hotel in New York and you saw this group of people wearing purple t-shirts and you're like, oh, cool. What are you
yeah,
guys doing? And they said, oh,
yeah,
we're running for pancreatic cancer.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
maybe you could tell us about that and how that inspired you to run for Project Purple.
So I always tried to. I mean, I was always in relatively good shape. I was, never great shape or terrible shape. I, exercised and did the stuff you're supposed to do. And I will say, for people going through it or for people next to people going through it, particularly during chemotherapy, the more you can walk and move, the better, I think. I think that was a thing that really helped me a lot. And I just walked and walked and walked and walked and walked. But I was in New York for treatment during the first trial, and I happened to be there during the marathon weekend. And there's a bunch of people, like you said, in purple shirts, and they said, "We're running for pancreatic cancer." I said, "Oh, I have that." And it put it in my mind that if I get through it, I never wanted to run a marathon. I've run my first and only marathon. I'm totally fine with that. But I was like, I'll try to run it. If I can do it, I'll try to raise money and run it. And I did it. I got through it, and then we raised a bunch of money, and we the crazy well, there's a million crazy things about it, but the New York Marathon, when you come over from Queens, you go over the Queensboro Bridge and you land on First Avenue, basically First and 59th. And during the second medical trial, the difficult one, I was on basically First and 58th. And I would walk from First and 58th up First Avenue to 74th. And that's where I had all my meetings. And I think, 768th or 71st or something was where I was in the clinic. So I ran by all of the places, my basically nightmare alley. I would try to walk to my appointments every day. Sometimes I could only walk like half a block, and I would basically sit down, walk, sit down, walk, sit down, like literally shuffling to my appointments. And I was in a place where I ran past all of those places. So it was a really incredible experience. My whole family came, and I won. I won my category. I won the male over 45 having had pancreatic cancer. That was my category, and I won it. So
Yes.
that was it. That was all I needed. So I don't need to run another one.
There you go. One and done.
Yeah.
Well, like what a true transformation though, and how like crossing that finish line. I always get choked up crossing the finish line because seeing everyone else out there and like training for a marathon is just grueling within itself. And so the sheer joy of having crossed that line, I'm sure was also kind of like, all right, I'm cancer free now.
Yeah, it was there was a real the whole race really was a moment of like I didn't really spend much time in New York City for my treatment. So like I know New York pretty well because I had cancer there for a long time. So it really is linked to that in my mind. And so going back and running literally the same steps that I shuffled down, I mean, it was incredibly powerful. And I ran step for step, one of my good friends and another friend, he was a little slower than me, but he started a little bit behind. And so he ran it as well. So we did that whole thing together. So it definitely helped enable me to put myself physically back together.
Mm.
I needed to train for it, so I had to be stronger. So it really helped put myself physically back together. And it didn't fix, all of the pain and anxiety that was generated from those years, but it did help me put a period at the end of that sentence. And it helped. I would definitely say it helped. And, having my family there was pretty wild. So.
It's such a magical experience. And Project Purple did a great job of kind of recapping the race and interviewing you and your family. So if people haven't seen that, I want one last question, and then you can tell us how we can find you. But for someone who has just been diagnosed or a family member trying to make sense of a pancreatic cancer diagnosis, what advice might you have for them?
Well, first of all, anybody can get in touch with me at any point. I get, every couple weeks, somebody sends me a message through some way to, hey, somebody in my family has this, or the other thing. And I'm alive because smart people in laboratories are finding ways to fight cancer. And I'm more than happy to help anybody through that whenever I can. So feel free to reach out to me. In terms of, it's like, for me, it was like you're going to war. You wake up, you do the thing. You just wake up, do the thing. You stay alive as long as you can. And it's not, some people think of that as like, oh, you have to enjoy life. Like, yeah, I mean, you have to find these moments of peace and joy and happiness wherever you can. But that's a lot. That's a tall order to tell somebody like, I I remember when people used to say, you got to stay positive, Dan. That's like the most important thing. And I want to be like, I don't know. I don't know if first of all, I think the chemo is going to be pretty important. Like, I'm pretty sure the chemo is going to be, and I know staying positive is a good thing, and I'm going to do my best, but I I'm not going to promise you that I can like, I'm just going to stay positive and like the positivity is going to get, that's just too much.
Yeah.
What I can do is I can wake up and I'm going to go to my appointment and I'm going to get my treatment and I'm going to eat what I can and I'm going to go walk and I'm going to do these things and I'm going to hug my wife and I'm going to play with my boys and I'm going to do those things. But I can't promise you I'm going to be happy about it all the time, you know? So my only advice is just keep going because the future is arriving, help is coming, people are figuring this stuff out. So just keep going.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Just
Um,
keep going, one step ahead of the other. It's one day at a time, moment by moment too, right? Well,
yeah,
you said moments matter, and I think that's so important for people to hear. And you're a true testament of, I think perseverance is so important as part of this and resilience. And the human body and the human spirit has such a will to live.
yeah,
And, that's what we want, right? We want to spread the
yeah,
love.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
Just, and there's always people in your life, they want you there.
mhm.
People, whether you have got a wife or a husband or kids or a mom or a dad or a sister or a brother or a cousin or friends, like the world's a better place for enough people. You just got to keep going.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Dan. And thank you so much for writing this book. Everything that makes me happy makes me sad. Fun life tips from Death's Abyss.
Well said. You said it without, because that subtitle's not easy to say.
So I will put a link to your book in our show notes, and then they can email you. And what's the best email to reach you at?
Oh, wait, or just reach me on Instagram is probably the easiest. So Dan McNamee 1 at Instagram. I don't know who Dan McNamee with no number is, and I don't know who Dan McNamee 2 is, but I'm Dan McNamee 1. So yeah, just send me a message and we'll connect for sure.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you so much, Dan. And I hope that we have another conversation in 5 more years and you can tell
For
us
sure.
about.
Anytime you want. It was a pleasure.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thanks so much for listening to this week's episode of Giving Grief Grace. If you found the content interesting and think it could help a friend or a loved one, please share it with them. Subscribe to this podcast and get a weekly dose of positivity. And while you're at it, please leave a review. If you enjoyed the show and want to support me financially on my grief journey, I'm raising funds for Project Purple, a nonprofit whose mission is to see a world without pancreatic cancer. I'm doing this by running the New York City Marathon in November 2025, and I'll leave a link to my fundraising page in the show notes. If you've lost a loved one and are looking for support in an online community, consider joining our free private Facebook group, Giving Grief Grace. May you be kind to yourself in the week ahead and give yourself grace. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you next week.